She was born into polygamy. Her family followed the teachings of Joseph Smith, including plural marriage. Like many young girls, she had been promised to a man who was her father's age. But she ran away. She chose hell over a life of polygamy. That girl was me. I was lost, alone, desolate. Then Jesus Christ found me and rescued me. In His love, I found real freedom. He is a shield to all who will take refuge in Him. This is why I can look back and ask, polygamy? What love is this? Welcome to Polygamy, What Love Is This? I'm your host, Doris Hanson, and we talk about early Mormon and present-day polygamy, and of course we talk about Joseph Smith, who started it all. But before we get started with this show, I would like to remind our viewers that we help people get out of polygamy. If you would like to escape, or if you just have questions about polygamy or biblical polygamy, a Shield and Refuge ministry would be happy to help you. You can go on their website, shieldandrefuge.org, or you can give us a call at a toll-free number, 877-425-9993, and everything we discuss about your personal situation will be held in complete confidence. If anyone would like to make comments about any of our shows, or if you would like to be a guest on our show, you can email us at email@whatloveisthis.tv, or you can call us at 385-240-2888, and we would love to hear from our viewers. Now, this is part 2 of the show we started last time with our guest Kathleen Melanakis, who has authored a book which has just been released, and the title of the book is Secret Combinations, Evidence of Early Mormon Counterfeiting, 1800 to 1847. She researched this book for over 8 years, traveling across the United States, digging into state archives, court records, and libraries. And so to complete our discussion of her book, I would like to introduce and thank Kathleen Kimball Melanakis.
Glad to be here.
Thank you for being here for these 2 interviews, to get people interested in the topic and the subject that probably is something they've never heard of before, or maybe just a little bit about, and how important it is for people who are relying upon Mormonism based on Joseph Smith, how important it is for them to really dig in and discover the truth for themselves and not just believe what anyone tells you.
Exactly. Jesus told us to investigate, to test people that claim to be prophets. There's a tremendous passage in Ezekiel, I think it's chapter 13. Anyway, it's throughout the scriptures where we are admonished to be careful, to not believe just anybody, and to, he gave true biblical tests for prophets.
He did, and we're supposed to do that, and so there's no excuse for anybody to be deceived or hoodwinked when God gives us the ability and the know-how to take care of it. So let's get into, we talked and introduced the aspect of Joseph Smith and the Smith family and early American counterfeiting in the 1800s and late 1700s, and how it all kind of got involved into actually early Mormonism. So now we're going to introduce the topic of Masonry as is intertwined with the Mormon movement. When General John W. Phelps came to Salt Lake City, he made a comment. Someone had asked him what he thought of Mormonism after his visit here, and this is what he said, and I quote, "The whole miserable thing had its rise in Masonry," referring to Mormonism. Explain.
I could not tell the story of what happened in early Mormonism without really investigating Masonry. And of course, they are a secret society. They want to keep secret. They don't disclose a lot of their
and that's the secret
goals
combinations, right?
Well, Joseph, it has been determined by historians, including Dan Vogel and some other major historians, that the secret combinations referred to in the Book of Mormon referred to the Masons. And this is at a time in history, in the history of America, when Masons, as a group, exerted a lot of influence. They had a lot of political power, of course, and they tried to keep it undisclosed. But they, they had become boastful. They had gained so much power. So the common man was also on the rise. Andrew Jackson had been elected. They were opening up Masonry to more of the common man. It had been an elite group. And so it was a time of great change. And a lot of people said that Joseph Smith modeled his Mormon church on the Masonic fraternity, where there's a secret inner group and there's an outer group that doesn't know the real goals of the organization. And what Joseph Smith did was put a Christian stamp on it, because at that time it was also the time of the Second Awakening. So many people were going into churches. So he kind of put those
Trying
two
to put 'em
things
all
together.
together.
So then no, it's no longer Masonry or Christianity. It's a syncretism.
And the label Mormonism kind of came along with that, because they're still doing that in much of the Mormon temple ceremonies.
Well,
They're
yeah,
still
and the
involved in
wrong-
that secrecy.
Christians don't build temples, because Jesus said, God does not live in a temple made by human hands. And he said, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name,
There
I am with them.
you. And someone greater than the temple is here, referring
Yes.
to himself.
But Masons do build temples, and they are very, big on temples. So Joseph put his, he wanted to compete with the Masons, and so that's why, temple building became a passion with the early Mormons.
And they still are.
And they
But the
still
Bible
are.
says that we're supposed to renounce those secret ways, the secret way. Jesus says, I did nothing in secret.
Right.
So all that secret combination stuff of Mormonism and with Masonry is anti what God would teach.
It's so ironic that in the Book of Mormon, secret combinations of all kinds, or especially the Gadianton robbers, which are identified as the Masons. I mean, people at that time would have identified it such, were condemned as satanic. But yet the Mormons had secret groups from the beginning. They had secret meetings. Sidney Rigdon said that they held secret meetings from the beginning. Emma wanted to be on the secret meetings. In Nauvoo, some of the men were part of 5 different secret groups.
Wow.
Including, and that's oath bound. That's,
Yeah.
I swear upon my death I won't tell the meeting, what happens at these meetings.
Yeah.
But they were part of the Nauvoo Masons. They were part of the Danites. They were part of the secret police. They were part of the endowment group, and
And they
one of
had-
the other ones. There's another one that. The Nauvoo Legion. They were also part of them. Part of them was Council of 50. Council of 50.
Yeah, that
was
was
also-
highly secretive. Now, the next quote I have is from page 218, which talks about how Joseph Smith thought he wanted to restore Masonry, which he claims he did with Christianity and Mormonism. But anyway, I quote, Joseph Smith was later said to have restored Masonry to its original or purified state when he formed the temple ceremonies in Nauvoo. And then you went on to write, finding gold plates in the ground directed by an angel sent from the biblical God made the restoration of all things seem more plausible. Did the Smith brothers take up Spalding's boast that he could write a burlesque of the Bible and make it be believable by all but the most studious historians? Their father had made the very same boast. We talked about this briefly in our last show. So explain what these quotes are all about, and what is this restoration that Joseph Smith thought? Was ego that big that he wanted to restore everything that he came across?
Well, there were others at that time that were trying that claimed that they were going to restore that purified, pure Masonry, and that it went back to its origins went back to before Christ, and it was ancient. And there was this big controversy between the ancient Masons, that they called themselves ancients, and the modern Masons, The ancients claimed that it went back to before Christ, but it was a false claim, and that was one of the big reasons that the anti-Masonic movement burst out on the scene. I mean, it was a huge cultural phenomena. It preceded the Civil War that took place a few years later, but there was this huge controversy between, it was the anti-Masonic movement and the Masonic movement. But let's see. We got away from this, the topic of the seer stones.
Yeah, talking about Joseph wanted to restore Masonry, and then he turns around and claims that he wanted to restore Christianity.
Yeah.
So his whole premise is he gets to restore things that there's no basis for restoration.
Well, yeah, Masonry is not Christian. I mean, it has its own whole system. And Masons claim not to be a religion, but ex-Masons have said that it is a religion. So there's a big controversy whether Masonry is even a religion.
And then there's those who have gone from Masonry to Mormonism and said there's too much familiarity here.
Yeah, and I only researched Masonry in the 19th century. I don't know about Masonry now, but back then they were deists. They were, deists. The leaders of the Masonic movement back then were deists who did not believe in the divinity of Christ, nor do they believe in the divinity of the Bible. So therefore, how can you amalgamate a deist group with a Christian group? But it turned out he was very popular and he got a lot of following, and that's what.
When they make that quote about a burlesque of the Bible, that's exactly what the Book of Mormon is a burlesque of the Bible.
Well, his father boasted, according to the Green Mountain Boys, which were the Vermont militia members, they wrote a letter to Thomas Sharp in Carthage, Illinois, saying that when they knew Joseph Smith Sr. in Vermont in the early 1820s, he had boasted that he could make a burlesque of the Bible and pass it off as real history, just like Solomon Spaulding had boasted. So, is that what they did? It's up to you to make up your mind.
Read the book and get more information. Now, you do mention in your book that William Law, who was one of Joseph Smith's counselors, second counselor, I think, in Nauvoo, he said that he believed that Joseph Smith's wife, Emma, was in on the Golden Plate hoax from the very beginning and was his full accomplice. So, are you of the same opinion of that? And is there evidence that she was an accomplice of other schemes, or just this scheme? Or
Well, it's interesting to think about the role of Emma, and I didn't concentrate on that in the book, but it seems to me that she had to be in on whatever schemes they had, because her parents, Isaac and Elizabeth Hale, went back in time. I mean, they had known the Smiths for years. They knew them most likely in the Woodscrape group in 1800. They lived nearby. They lived within a few miles. Mm-hmm. And they hailed back to the same town in Connecticut where so many of the early Mormons came from. And Isaac Hale was in the very midst of the events in 1824 in Susquehanna County, where Joseph Smith's money-digging partner, who paid all his expenses for probably 2 years, was murdered. Oliver Harper was his money-digging partner. He was murdered, and it was believed by some in the county that it was by a member of Joseph Smith's money-digging group.
So Emma would be, at least Emma's family would be aware of this nonsense going on with the
Yes, Isaac
Smith
and
family.
Elizabeth Hale lived across the street or next door to the man who was convicted of Oliver Harper's murder. Mm-hmm. And they had to know if there was counterfeiting going on, and 11 people at Oliver Harper's trial testified in court that counterfeiting was going on, that Jason Treadwell was counterfeiting, dealing in counterfeit money. So, and then there were 10 people in the trial who were close associates of Joseph Smith or Emma Smith, Emma Hale Smith, part of her family. So they were all in this trial of this person who was murdered,
So there would be a lot.
and she had to know
She
what
had
was
to
going,
have
but
known some of what.
but this is all
Except
really
the-
new ground. No one's really looked into this Oliver Harper whole incident.
And
So
I don't believe Emma would be involved in the polygamy part of it, because I think that truly broke her
Oh,
heart.
no.
But some of the other stuff she had to have been aware of.
well, William Law said she was,
Yeah.
and he should have known. He was
Yeah,
on the
he
inner
was there,
circle, and he
yeah.
was a confidant.
During the
But yeah, the polygamy, that was carrying it too far. She did not go along with
didn't
that.
go for that.
She almost divorced Joseph Smith over that.
During the translation process of the Book of Mormon, Joseph Smith claimed to be receiving revelation, and so a prophet is born, so to speak. Would you, from your investigation, say that this is all a money thing rather than a religious thing? That
Well, it was a
he developed
way-
a following, from all
Yeah,
this?
neighbors said that he developed the whole religious persona in order to cover up his money digging and getting in trouble for other things. And neighbors did suspect them of counterfeiting.
So if
in
he
New
can
York.
come out and say, "And God said," then that could be a good cover for some of this
Right,
stuff.
it was hard to prove a religious, it's hard to prove that someone's a religious fraud. It's easier to prove that he's doing other fraud.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I get that. Yeah. So Joseph Smith had a pretend Bible with pretended revelations, with the pretended seer stone that he pretended to translate from as a pretended prophet for a pretended kingdom of God, and he and Hiram be the ones who would bring in the millennium. That's actually, you've written that in that book. Is there evidence for all this pretense?
well, let's just say that Oliver Cowdery, his bosom buddy, his cousin, who knew him way prior to the Book of Mormon, since at least 1823, he was reported to have been hobnobbing around with the Smiths that early. He was the witness to the Book of Mormon. He was the scribe to the Book of Mormon. He's the one that said in a letter that I can no longer go along with this, with your pretended revelations. So
So he said that.
if anybody would know if they were pretend or not, it would be Oliver Cowdery. And look at and there were even times when Joseph Smith admitted that he was putting on an act. When Josiah
There are
Quincy
times.
came in Illinois, he winked and nodded and said, "Well, I'm a prophet." So I mean,
yeah.
make up your own mind. I mean, look at the evidence, is what I say.
Yeah, look, and the footnotes that you've got plenty in your book. So on pages 299 and on page 300, you have presented a list of at least 34 people by name, many of them who were Mormon VIPs, who had bench warrants or indictments or arrest records, jail sentences, or testimony that they trafficked in counterfeit money. So your logical question is that with so many accusations, so many legal indictments, there would have to be guilt attached somewhere. It can't be all considered as a giant mistake. So Joseph Smith worked in counterfeit money, but he worked through subordinates, right? He didn't
Right.
take the brunt of it himself. He was...
Well, yeah, by the time they were driven out of Ohio, I counted dozens of inner circle Mormons that had been accused in one way or another by either the authorities or by other Mormons, or even within the inner circle, they accused each other of counterfeiting money, especially in the Danite Manifesto. They republished it to the world. Joseph Smith.
So they didn't keep their oaths of secrecy very
No,
good.
they
They
didn't.
started
Well,
accusing each other.
That was because, Joseph Smith wanted to destroy the reputations of Oliver Cowdery, David Whitmer, and Lucas Johnson, because he wanted them out of the picture now. So that's what he used.
yeah.
He revealed what they had been doing, counterfeiting money, which was, but so there's all these accusations by even within the group of counterfeiting. So but the Mormons will say, well, they never got convicted. No, not of counterfeiting as such. But if they were, but I can, I say, why were they constantly being accused? Can we reasonably assume that none of these were ever warranted? They kept being accused over and over. They accused each other. It was easy. They were oath bound to perjure themselves in court if they ever got caught, which they
Yeah.
did, especially in the trial of Grandison Newell. So when law enforcement is really weak and when you have oath bound secret networks, then it's very hard for the authorities to convict you.
Exactly. Kind
But
of
they
like a
but they
mafia
sure got
thing,
accused a lot.
So,
And
so I think, and I thought this as I was reading your book, and so I'm going to voice it right now. People are basing their eternal lives on the testimony of these characters who are involved in all of this illegal activity.
yeah.
And even if only half of it was true, even if only a tenth of it is true, how can we base our eternity on that?
Well, believe me, I was depressed when I first found a lot of this. I mean, these are my ancestors. It's not something to be proud of. It's, it was shocking to me. It was disturbing to me. I was depressed about it for weeks. But you can't avoid the conclusions that you have to come to.
The truth is the truth. That's just,
Yeah,
you
and
have
so
to face it. And
thank the Lord, that I'm forgiven because of Jesus. No matter what my ancestors did, doesn't matter
Amen,
because, or even what I've done, I have the free gift of salvation, so I can rest easy that I can have peace.
yeah.
But how you spend eternity is the most important question you'll ever answer.
Right.
And who is God, and what do you base your life on? Those are the most important
And we
questions.
can't base it on the characters that we are finding out that the Smith family and the early Mormons were actually like. Their integrity was in question.
I have nothing but admiration for the people who pioneered the West, and they faced hardships, and they were brave, and they went out beyond the borders. That
Well,
they were
just-
sincere believers.
Just like today, the regular
yeah.
Mormon isn't involved in all that. They're the one who's being hoodwinked.
Well, unfortunately, just we have to test our truth claims, and
That's right.
And
That's right.
eternity is a long, long time.
It is. It is.
And why are we here? It's to.
I want to quote from page 455
Okay.
as we wind down on the review of your book. It's kind of a long quote, and I have an error in the name of this man, John Correll.
John Correll.
Yeah, I had
Corrill.
I had it printed wrong. Anyway, but this is what I'm quoting from. Succeeding Mormon John Corrill said, "We were commanded in the most rigid manner to follow him, Smith, which the church did until many were led into the commission of a crime. Brigham Young extended Smith's secret methods in the wilderness of the Great Basin, including counterfeit money on a large scale. The Joseph Smith that so many of his followers revere today, seeing him second only to Jesus Christ in virtue, is an invention that has grown even more mythical over time. Most Mormons today, and I would add polygamists, would not recognize the Smith revealed in the historical records." This is an astounding, breathtaking statement, and it's quoted. Yeah, and Brigham Young knew what was going on. He brought it west as well. And there's more mind-boggling information in your book, by the way, for our viewers. Yet many my people, your people, still in the LDS Church, they'll never dare to investigate what is said here, right here, about what early Mormonism really was. The Joseph Smith that they revere today is not the historical Joseph Smith.
No.
What do you think? How do you deal with that?
Well, I
Your
wrote
heartbreak over it.
It is. I wrote my master's thesis on the essay by William James. He wrote an essay called "The Will to Believe," and he said that there, you can't. The will is not going to affect everyday decisions, like whether you should go through a red light, but it will affect larger questions like whether God exists, what you're going to base your life on.
It's a choice.
It's your will is going to, or if you allow it to, cloud your vision as to what's true. If you just keep wanting to believe something without really looking at
Yeah,
it,
then
then
that's
you
what
may
you'll
be
believe.
basing your life on a
How
on a
true.
falsehood. So,
Well, thank you, Kathleen. Again, we're out of time. Where can people buy your book as we
okay,
close
they
here?
can get it at Amazon.com. There's 5 places: utlm.org, Sandra Tanner's bookstore. You can get it at Benchmark Books in Salt Lake City. You can get it at Calvary Chapel Bookstore in Murray, or on our website, MormonCounterfeiting.com, and that you can get the digital copy.
And they have it. You have a digital copy now, and also you have a telephone number and an email address or a website. Did we already do that? The MormonCounterfeiting.com.
MormonCounterfeiting.com.
And your telephone 760-443-5409 if somebody wants to call you and discuss this information.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you.
Well, this is great information. We didn't cover everything we wanted to, but then we don't need to cover everything because we want them to buy your book and read it.
Yeah, there's a lot of information.
And it is a lot. You did a good job. It took you 8 years of study and then 2 years before you could even finally get your book put together and published. And it's just come out this week.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate your sharing
I
your
can't
time.
run and I can't hide now.
Well, I hope that it's well received by your family and those you love. And I pray that
I hope they take it in the spirit of love that I wrote.
Yeah.
I hope it will help
in the
people.
spirit of truth.
It's
Yeah.
to help people,
Yeah.
especially my relatives in polygamy or in the church. So
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
yeah.
You know, we don't do shows like this just to criticize Joseph Smith. The eternity of loved ones and millions of others are wound up in the claims of Joseph Smith. Thousands of lives have been ruined and are still being ruined because of Joseph Smith's polygamy. Too many people leave polygamy groups and join the LDS Church, but it's the same imperfect Joseph Smith who made these colossal mistakes. Our heart's desire and prayer is for Mormons and polygamists to take the opportunity and the courage to check things out, check him out, and to do it outside of the Mormon sanitized history. It was Jesus who died on the cross for our sins, and it is Jesus who is only Jesus who is worthy of our loyalty and trust. May God help every viewer turn to and trust in Jesus Christ alone. Thanks for watching. God bless.